Okay. Hi, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. I know it's been a minute since I've recorded an episode, and as I mentioned in my last episode, it is because I've had a bit of an upheaval in my personal life, having stumbled across a potential partner person that was more than the average situation that I anticipated. And I've been kind of deep in process with that relationship, and today we're actually going to be talking about it. So I have Ryan Evans Coleman on this podcast today. We're going to talk a little bit about what's unfolding between us and our adventures in conscious partnership. And Ryan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. No, thank you, Nadia. A little about me. I don't even know, where do I begin? Well, I've been on kind of like a long spiritual journey, so to speak, where maybe the last 5 to 6 years, that's become a really strong, important part of my life. Prior to that, I kind of dabbled in many things, was part-time artist, other stuff, but really kind of moved into this new stage of my life. With the last 5 to 6 years, I got a master's degree, which is essentially spiritual psychology from Columbia. And yeah, it has kind of blossomed into what is starting to unfold for me is what seems like more of my calling and where I'm really headed, which is some degree of like a medicine person. I'm really enjoying and excited right now about men's work and men's coaching, and there's just other deeper things I'm exploring, different like shamanic type practices, or just I don't know how to bring magic and excitement back into the world and really helping people bring that enlivenment to their life. So um, yeah, it's a process that's continuing to unfold for me, and I'm seeing what it really wants to crystallize into right now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's been awesome to find a man who does similar work to what I do, who's on the medicine path, who's emotionally intelligent and psychic and open-hearted, and it's been such a joy getting to know Ryan, and I'm excited to bring him to the podcast to let you get to know him as well. So Ryan, I actually think I want to talk before we talk about relationship dynamics. I think I want to talk about how we met first because it's
Uh,
really fun.
okay.
And yeah, so why don't you? I would love for you to start. Go back to 2022.
Sure. Yeah, 2022. I had actually been fairly recently had relocated over to Portland, Oregon. And I was actually pretty fresh out of a relationship breakup. And I was kind of going through a bit of a tough time. I mean, we all can remember 2020 was mayhem, to say the least. And so, kind of after this breakup and what was all going on, I was really I was in Portland, didn't know a lot of people, was really looking for something new. And I had been doing some degree of like shamanic practice, journeying and such, and other spiritual things. And I wanted more of that to be a community and to find people that were into that. So, started, searching around, and I found your offering the Sacred Heart Medicine up there, across the border in Washington. And said, okay, it looks great. And started coming to some of the events. And yeah, I remember it was, yeah, that felt like, okay, this is cool. I'm enjoying this. And that's really how we met, initially. And yeah, I did do one of the bigger deep ceremonies with you, which was pretty life changing as well. And that one, yeah, was very significant for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. So for those of you who don't know, had an extremely active community in the Pacific Northwest where we were doing like basically shamanic activities, teaching people how to do journey work, having like coffee meetups or tobacco ceremonies, and then also retreats. And that's how Ryan and I met initially. And it was really weird because, he attended some events and he was a cool person, but the dynamic was different, right? And he actually relocated to Denver not long after. And I remember the moment he told me he was relocating. And here I was, like, married, two kids, like in the process of purchasing a house. Um, life seemed, I don't know, it was fine, whatever it was. But I remember the moment he told me he was leaving, and I felt gutted. I was like, in my mind thinking, "Why are you running away from your heart? Like, I don't understand." And that visceral feeling stuck with me. And recently we found out that, or I found out that he actually told me that over brunch, and I totally blocked it out. So I
Yeah.
remembered the conversation and I remembered how it made me feel, but I blocked out the whole situation of it, which tells me there was something there even then. Um, yeah, working behind the scenes.
Yeah. And I'll just add on to that because I remember at the time and then afterwards a little bit thinking, she seemed to take that differently than I expected. Like, because, you were married and had kids, and it was sort of, you seemed to be more upset than I expected that I was leaving. And so, yeah, it was a funny thing to happen at that moment.
It was funny. Yeah. And then, fast forward to 2025, and we kind of connect again over shamanic training type stuff. And the first thing we did was we had to have a conversation and rehash that whole how Ryan left. And I had to tell him, like, I don't know why, but this was really upsetting to me. It left a really sour taste in my mouth. I feel like we need to talk about it, but I don't know. I don't understand why. And he was so amazing and so open to it, to having that conversation. And ultimately, we're like, okay, well, we don't really know what that was, but that was weird. Let's keep moving forward. Right. And so, in between then and now, like, I've gotten divorced and I relocated, and Ryan relocated, and here we are coming back together. Um, and so I wanted to start with this because how we came back together just was really fun and interesting aside from that piece. Um, yeah, is it okay if I talk about that?
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So we came together October of last year, 2025. Right. So about 5 months ago. And um, there was still that weirdness of like, we don't really understand why that first departure was so bizarre. We came together over this weekend for a training experience, and immediately there was like something there. Like, I felt pressure in my heart. I felt some weird like energetic stuff going through my body. The week before this retreat, I had a perfume bottle shatter on me, and it was a perfume that I bought that smelled like a man because, we like boy smells. And so it was like a, one of those like barber shop smells, and I would occasionally use it because it was part of my process of calling in a partner, right? It's like imagining a partner, a boy smell near you. And I'll talk about that more in the masterclass we have coming up, like how I called this in on purpose. But I had this perfume bottle breaking. During the weekend, my mom kept sending me photos of a wedding that was taking place on a beach, which was so weird, not like her at all. One day I came out and I had a necklace on with this like Nordic rune, and Ryan asked me about it, and he like pulled down his shirt and he has the same tattoo of my necklace. And I'm like, well, that's weird because to me, this necklace means destiny. Like, it means that I'm moving towards this thing, even if I don't know I'm moving towards it. And so I asked him about the tattoo, and of course he got it after we met initially. And so it was kind of new as well. And then throughout the weekend, I had an experience of breaking 4 eggs with double yolks in them, which just is weird and random, and that's never happened before. Um, I had a coach that I was working with to help prepare me for partnership that I was calling in, and she kept telling me, like, when you see 1111, like, your partner is coming or your partner's here. And I never resonated with angel numbers or anything. And Ryan and I are talking, and it turns out his birthday is on 11/11. It was just like lots of moments like this kind of signaled, hey, pay attention. Like, you're on the right track. And we left that weekend of like, at least for me, I was like, all right, there's something here. I want to pursue it. And yeah, just like, I don't know how to do that. You live in Colorado and I live in Florida. Um, and that was the start of it. Yeah. So what your experience was, we haven't actually really talked about this again.
Well, for me, it was I remember when you first walked in the door. So we were at this retreat and for this like opening weekend. And I remember you walked in the door, and I just had this excitement come up inside of me that was kind of like almost felt like being like a little kid, or like just excited that you were there. And I found myself thinking, huh, I didn't expect that excitement to come through. And so, me, I was not in the place of sort of trying to call in a partner. I was out there for the shamanic training program, thinking, okay, I want to change my life. I want to like really get to a place of like something that's meaningful, and I'm just something is better coming in. So that's where my mind was at. I wasn't out there thinking about that. Um, so then I think when, and just being totally honest, some of the synchronicities when you brought them up, I'm sort of, there's a part of me that's sort of like kind of dismissing, like, okay, sure, whatever. But undoubtedly there was, throughout that weekend, like just this kind of a draw that was happening, and we were both feeling it. And it was definitely, a little weird too. It was like, wait, I wasn't expecting this. And what's going on right
Totally. Yeah, it was like something much bigger was at play. Very unexpected on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, speaking of like what brought you to the retreat, like let's talk a little bit about where we both were in our lives and what we were looking for or what we weren't looking for, and kind of go into that a little bit. So, yeah, share a little bit about that.
Yeah, kind of like I was starting to say there, that it was, I think I was into this place where I was feeling pretty flat, and I had been doing a bunch of different sorts of healing modalities and inner work over the last few years. I'd gone to Costa Rica and sat with ayahuasca for a week. I had done like a week on Joe Dispenza meditation retreat. I'd gone to this crazy trip in Egypt and was in all the pyramids and all this, and just but doing these things, and it still felt like my life wasn't just gaining the traction in the direction I wanted to go. So for me, it was this real feeling of I don't really know my place. I feel like I have deeper gifts and abilities I really want to unlock and really feel solid in them. And was just kind of looking for a way to do that. And that's really kind of what I was looking for. I had been about I s- 5 years out of a relationship. At that when we last year in 2025 was about 5 years since I'd really been in a relationship, 4 to 5, and I dated a touch over those 4-ish years, and it was really tough. The dating on apps and things were just wasn't working. I was really struggling to find people that I feel like I could really connect with, and quite frankly had very little interest in anything that didn't feel like really aligned and meaningful. It wasn't even fun to mess around with it. It was like, I don't know about this. So yeah, that's kind of what I was coming in with.
Yeah, and you weren't even really actively dating at the time that you came to the retreat, right?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's very different from where I was coming from. Because over the last couple of years, like my marriage had ended, and even before it ended, like in relationship coaching and therapy and my own coach, I started really being aware of this strong desire that I had for partnership. Like I didn't just want a partnership, I wanted like top fucking tier partnership. I wanted someone who was going to see me and match me and challenge me and bring in like the romance and the life and the love and everything that I want. Really made that decision that I was not going to settle for less. So I started working really hard to call that in. And I'd say it started maybe 2024, almost 2 years ago now, and got pretty serious after my divorce, and really focused a lot of my attention and energy into it. And so, I knew this was coming. It was just a more of like, when is it coming? And I was completely like it was very unexpected because as we'll talk about a little bit more, like we're not each other's type at all. And thank God. So yeah, that's where I was coming from, just the intentional calling in. And I feel like it's important to mention because sometimes like what you want, you want it, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't know that that's what you want or need until it shows up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I've been working with over these past number of months in some ways, I wasn't really looking for this. But it's sort of, it seems like the more we're kind of going down this path, that it's telling me like, look, that this is actually part of what you were asking for. You just didn't know that this was a central component. So I thought I could do it all by myself. That's all.
I think that kind of leads into a really interesting topic, though, of when you're on the spirit, like the grounded spiritual path, you have to learn how to get out of the way and surrender to what wants to be delivered to you. And like, I don't know, what are your thoughts on the relationship being one of those things?
I mean, absolutely. I think with all those ideas of when something is really trying to come in and we think we know what is best for us. I know for myself. I'm like, okay, I think it's gonna be this. I just need to know what the career title is, or how to go about making the money, or what website I need to build, or something like that. And I think that that's gonna get me to the place. And it's like the blinders are on and missing all the other opportunities out there. And it's so far, it's felt like such a lesson that, oh wow, by connecting with you, it's opening me up to so much personal growth. And then also other opportunities seem to be kind of coming in, and like I'm meeting new people, and I'm having different experiences where I can start to see, oh wait, maybe that I would like to do that. I never thought of that. um but yeah, very much the getting out of the way and saying like, okay, there might be some sort of consciousness that knows better than I do what I really want, or what would make me the most happy.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel kind of similar?
Yeah, I mean, totally, totally. One of my favorite books is The Surrender Experiment, which is all about like looking at what delivers itself to you and getting out of the way and saying yes, regardless of whether or not you like it or you think that that's what you need. And this whole relationship so far has been surrender on surrender. And we'll talk about that more in the next podcast. But yeah, it's been good lessons.
I know.
Um,
Mm.
so let's talk a little bit about like, so I think what we're really wanting to share here is what's possible in a conscious relationship, and like an intentional higher level relationship where two people are emotionally intelligent, spiritually developed, and want relationship, right? They're not looking to mess around. They want partnership. And we really want to go into where we were before meeting and the kind of people we were attracted to, and then also talk about like how this is different. And we'll talk a little bit about that today, but we'll have a second podcast going more deep into it. So today we're kind of laying the foundation a little bit. I want to talk about what we were attracted to previously. And I guess I'll start on this one. Well, because, we're talking about relationship, I notice a lot of my clients will say, I don't know why I keep attracting the same kind of person. I don't know why I'm so drawn to this, because consciously I know that I don't want it, but like I can't stay away. I don't understand. And they just eventually give up because they can't even see the possibility of something else or something more. So I'll share with you guys like what my type was. And, you know, as an aside, I haven't been dating in several years. I went on one date after I got divorced and it was a good date. But I walked away like knowing that I could never settle for less than what was on my list of what I was looking for. Um, and I just waited until it showed up and believed that it was possible. So yeah, my type previously was emotionally unavailable. So a man that was not capable of going deep into his emotions. And that was super safe for me because it meant that I didn't have to go super deep into my emotions. And I could always be the more emotionally intelligent one, which gave me a superiority complex. It meant that nobody could really see me very deeply because they weren't very deep. And that's a protection piece, right? And Ryan is the opposite of that. He is extremely emotionally intelligent and makes me confront myself regularly, which is great, but also an adjustment. For a number of years, I was looking for basically like a father to my children and somebody to take care of me. So someone who could bring in the money, who could be dad. I was married for a long time, and so that was a big part of my life. And now kind of readjusting to being a single mom and putting aside like a family man for true partnership. What am I looking for in a partner? And then I think another big theme for me was attracting people that I needed to change for. So nobody that I was ever with fully accepted me for who I was. Like they wouldn't give me attention until I lost weight and or until like I made an effort with makeup or with my clothes or something. I had been on like a yo-yo weight loss journey where I would meet somebody new and I would lose 100 pounds and they would be automatically like so attracted to me. And then inevitably I would gain weight because I never lost it in a healthy way. And then it was like being with a different person. So I always felt like I had to change. Like I was never really accepted for who I was. And obviously, you can't find happiness at the bottom of that kind of relationship. So those were some of my patterns, the things that I was attracted to. Yeah. And what about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I appreciate hearing all that, and I think we've obviously talked about it one on one. And for me, it was essentially, I feel like I can sum it all up that my relationships, it all kind of revolved around some deep kind of something missing inside of me, some sense of self-esteem or need that I just wanted someone to fill it in a way. And so in some ways, then I would kind of gravitate towards whoever was available, women who were like, they would just be there. They'd either be there, they'd be interested in me and be like, okay, great, cool. And so I wouldn't have to put out too much work or put out too much effort to kind of make it happen. That, but then it was trying to just say, like, oh, well, you like me, so now I feel better. Another pattern similar to that is actually would then be attracted to women who I would be trying to save them in some way. They had some sort of, life traumas that they were going through or physical things, or I could just come in and be so knowledgeable or supportive or whatever. And it would just, again, it would give me this sense of fulfillment, this meaning of, oh, I'm helping you. And that makes me feel really good. Of course, there is a really sinister side to that, that it means that I need her to stay there. Because if she gets better, then now I just lost my meaning, which does, it's a little subtle thing that happens. And I definitely felt some of that. And yeah, and I think just within that, sometimes just literally like wanting more of a, like the popular cheerleader type, just that almost stereotypical thing of, if that woman, that girl who is so attractive, popular, everyone's looking at her, if she likes me, then I'll feel better about myself. It'll boost my status. And that was kind of like what I wanted, what I just kept looking for, and never was able to really, it never felt fulfilling. And yeah, it was just such a challenge. And I think when you come down into it and look at it, well, obviously, because I'm trying to feel a real deep sense of, self-acceptance and fulfillment in myself because of who I'm with. And yeah, looking at that over the years has been, it's been a tough kind of wound to be working on and to heal, and it's still in process at this point. But yeah, it's better than it used to be.
Totally. Yeah, like having your value wrapped up in a relationship and choosing relationships for the sense of value they give you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel like that's
Yeah.
how all toxic relationships start.
Yeah. Yeah. Even just so like saying it out loud sometimes, like, okay, that's what it was. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It is
Mm.
vulnerable. Yeah, so I mean, I want to like talk about I don't know if practically is the word, but like specifically what these relationships could look like, right? So I gave you guys one example about my weight, right? Or emotional unavailability. But when we're talking about day to day, how does an unhealthy relationship look? And I think we've normalized a lot of this stuff, and it would be a good opportunity to tell like some real time, hey, this is what these unfulfilling relationships looked like. Um, because I know some people might not even realize that they're attracted to unhealthy relationships. They just know that they're unhealthy, or they know that something feels off. So I want to share like kind of some real time, deeper explanations of it. Like for me, with the emotional unavailability piece, like there were so many therapists and coaches and professionals that we called in to help us try to fix what was going on. But when the emotional depth isn't there, or the ability to go deep emotionally, like there's no amount of outside help that ever could have helped. And it almost like made it worse for me, because it instilled this idea that I was the problem. It was never, or not instilled, it reinforced this idea that I already had, that I was the problem. So if I'm in a relationship that's not getting better, and I believe that I'm the problem, it means that I have to work harder and harder and harder. And of course, there's a lot of struggle and suffering in that. And you kind of get lost in it. Like when you're in a bad relationship or a bad marriage for so long, you can't even see it anymore, because you're just so deep in the hole. And so I noticed that to be a really big thing. And that, of course, perpetuates the belief that I'm not good enough, which I think most of us have. Um, yeah, so not great. Like, I'm the problem. I need to change. Yeah, so that's a big one that I've been dealing with. But also I want to talk about this, like this sense of longing and dissatisfaction, like in general, right? I mean, a couple years ago, one of my mentors, God, we sat down for coffee. She's this little Armenian shaman, and she's wonderful. She taught me so much. But she told me that romance wasn't real. And she
Hmm.
was like, it doesn't exist, Nadia. You need to let it go. And I refuse. I refuse, because what would life be without that? What would it be without sweet stories and big love? And, I used to listen to like romance novels to help me go to sleep at night. And they weren't like super spicy or X-rated or anything. It was more just, it was the love, it was the romance, it was like the longing for these connections that we are told societally are impossible or are unhealthy, or like, Ryan just earlier, him and I had this conversation about being excited about being in relationship, and like how that's okay and normal, and please be excited.
It was
Um,
news to me.
like we're taught to believe that relationship can't be super fucking important. Like it can't be a number one thing in your life. But really, what I'm starting to feel is that it can be a number one thing in your life. That the thing you can do when you have a partner in crime on that level is fucking unstoppable. Like the level of fulfillment, the level of growth, the level of partnership and support. And to me, that is romance, right? Romance
Mm.
isn't like a fucking fairy tale. It's love, and it's sweetness, and it's, yeah, I mean, it's
I want
everything
to,
we're going to talk about.
yeah, I want to kind of come up on top of that too, because I really appreciate what you just said there. That like that's what romance is, in the sense that, like, in my mind, there's this silly Disney romance idea of, like Lady and the Tramp in the alley eating spaghetti. That's romance, but and that's what that's the only thing that romance is. And I really like that idea that no, this is about like the deeper connections, the partnership. And I think one thing, because as we were discussing, that feels relevant for me, is this sense that it's actually okay to really need, or I mean, maybe need is like to want a really powerful partnership, and to understand that it's okay to seek that out, but also knowing that, you know what, I can't do everything on my own. And like as a man, that is something that, you know, uh, was kind of told to me growing up in various ways, whether directly or indirectly, is sort of, I'm supposed to be self-sufficient, provider of certain things, and then um, that, trying to think of the relationship as something that will truly make my life better and boost me up, that was a story that felt like, oh wait, I can't do that. That means I'm somehow weak or less than if I need a relationship to be my best self, so to speak.
Right. Crazy. It's almost like it was designed to keep us smaller than we are.
So almost.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny you mentioned fairy tale because we have had a fairy tale conversation. Um,
Mm.
right? That's actually kind of a fun side story. But let's tell it after you talk about your real-time experience previously.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I mean, with kind of how some of those past relationships looked, that then the challenge I was facing, it definitely it felt like a lot of times I would lose myself. I would stop being me in a sense. I would get too kind of, yeah, just lost in what it was, and I get too much people pleasing. I would start moving between like the freeze, the flight, fight, fawning. I would be really just looking into this place of I'm really trying to. I'm not asserting myself. I'm not saying what I want, who I am in the relationship. It's all like, oh, what do you want? I'll just figure out how to make you happy as best I can, and then we'll be good. And then, I mean, there's a degree to which, yeah, I want to be cognizant of my partner's needs and what she is feeling. But if that's all I'm doing, it just really it had two kind of effects when I would do that. One, it would one relationship, it actually started to become a source of conflict where she was getting frustrated with it and then saying like, well, I want you to be more assertive. I want you to be more like putting yourself forward and taking charge. And then in another one, it was we just sort of kind of passion just started drifting away, and we just sort of became like friends who lived together. And honestly, there was even a moment where in that longer relationship where, yeah, like we hadn't had sex in I think like 3 months. And I kind of mentioned that to her at one point. And she said, oh, really? I hadn't noticed. It's like, okay, that's probably not a good thing right now that it just, it's very comfortable. And that kind of just continued on. And so, yeah, I think that was like, that's kind of like the two ways I really saw that happening in relationships that I was in. Um, yeah. And I think if I'm kind of going back to the way I was always looking for that partner to fill something in me, um, lo and behold, she didn't do it. Surprise, surprise. And then there's this aspect of me where I'm not maybe not fully in it, or maybe not fully uh, yeah, being as loving or connected to her as I could be. And so I'm kind of, even wondering if there's something better out there, maybe. And so there's a little bit of that energy where I'm just not fully here and fully committed to her. And obviously that whether or not that gets ever named, it's felt and it causes conflict and tension as well. So yeah, those are just kind of some of the ways I think that for me it manifested in how I was acting too.
Yeah, I imagine that it's also hard to like really be a full 50% partner in a relationship when you're like seeking your value out of the other 50% or trying to make them happy,
Oh,
you know.
100%. Yeah, there's no way it can happen. I don't At this point I don't think there's any way it can happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. I don't think that's an uncommon thing for sure. I think all the stuff we've talked about is pretty common patterns that a lot of people share.
Definitely. I think so.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
So I mean, we've shared a little bit of background, a little bit of our experience, and I think what we want to go into next is how this has been so different. We're going to talk about that like just a little bit and then go into it more deeply next week on the podcast, and kind of talk about like how we've learned how to regulate our nervous systems, how we've learned how to communicate, and how fucking messy and hard and like
Unbelievably
unexpectedly
messy.
unexpectedly challenging something so magical is at exactly the same time as being magical and awesome. Yeah, so we'll talk about that more next week, but want to kind of leave you with a little bit of that today. Yeah, so first I want the fairy tale story was your idea. Can you recap like how that came about?
And try to set it up. I think we were going back and forth on one of our sort of voice note conversations, and it had just come to me, this idea of what if, because we were, I do kind of forget, but we were trying to get some sort of orientation with each other of how we saw the relationship, where it was headed.
Yeah, we had different
And
perspectives on like what it was that we were and where we were in the process.
yeah. And so that it just kind of came to me like, what if this was a fairy tale? And you know how just the way that fairy tales are so simplified sometimes, and you can just really see the arcs transforming and where it's going and what's happening, and so it makes it really easy to see. And I thought, like, what if we shared what our own individual versions of this fairy tale are, and maybe that make it an easy way to say like, oh, that's what you're seeing and what you think is happening right now. And it ended up being pretty illuminating, I think, to just sort of get us connected. And because it was, did you? Because we had talked a little bit about this idea of being on the path together. Like we're in a forest and we're walking together in just walking along the path. And this path is the path of like spiritual growth and life and whatnot. And that's kind of where like at least my idea of this fairy tale come on, where I was sort of thinking of, okay, I feel like this little boy who almost just woke up from like a being in a cave, and he was all beaten up in the cave, and it was a bunch of hard times and whatnot, and then he's come out, and there he meets this girl, and she's like, oh, like look at the sun and the trees, and like let's just kind of walk through the forest and it'll be nice, we'll do that together. And so I'm sort of, okay, cool. And she's like helping me, in this fairy tale way of like helping me come back to life and learning about the world again. And um and then I think at least what came to me is a fairy tale idea, and sometimes in those stories then there's going to be like a split or a division part, and then, oh, I have to go off and see the world on my own. But then, you can imagine that maybe in a Disney movie where then I go off, and then where there's like the sadness piece, and then like, okay, well, we're separated, and then like eventually wanting to come back together to say, oh, maybe that was actually really what I wanted. I needed to see other things first. So that was kind of how it had occurred to me. And I know you had a very different fairy tale though that had come to you.
Well, I think this is a really good opportunity to mention one of the communication pieces is like, okay, Ryan was kind of struggling, I think, with the I don't know if you want to call it commitment, but like labels maybe, or like what is this? And there was not a lot of solidification around it at that point in time. And I had expressed like, oh, I this is how I see it. This is my experience. And he had expressed something different, and we were like, there was friction there. We're like, okay, we're both here. We're both like in it. We both have the feels, but we're having a mismatch of how we're communicating. And he came in and was like, let's tell it like a fairy tale. That will be helpful. And honestly, it was really helpful. And that's one of those moments of being able to approach something that could have blown us up with playfulness and curiosity and this intuitive idea of creating a simplified story so we can get on the same page. And like, this is such a good illustration of how awesome this relationship is.
Well, I am glad that the fairy tale worked. For sure.
Yes, it totally worked. And it surprised, I think it really surprised both of us, like what our fairy tales were. Mine was, yeah. So, okay. Did it surprise you to hear mine?
Yes. Yeah. Tell it.
Okay. What?
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Okay. So I had viewed our dynamic as like there's a girl and she has her own kingdom, right? And she rules the kingdom and she's never even thought about ruling with someone else because why? Like there's nobody as powerful as she is. She's the fucking queen. And her kingdom is massive and there's so many like walls and structures and everybody does a job and it's very efficient and it's very big. It's like a well-oiled machine. And then one day she sees a dragon fly over her kingdom and she's like, wait, what? There are dragons? What's this? And it turns out that there's a kingdom not too far away that's run by a boy. And his kingdom is wild and there are no walls and there are no streets and there's no people. It's all animals and beings and nature and it's wild, right? And she starts to be able to see like, oh, actually that looks kind of nice. I would like to have more of that and maybe less walls. And maybe he's looking at her walls and thinking, huh, walls could be nice for some things. And there's a little bit of fear because we don't want the walls to shut out the nature and we don't want the nature to take over the kingdom. And this like dance of seeing the value in each other's kingdom and learning to integrate and learning to appreciate and be like, wait a second, you're like me. Can we do this together? Yeah, mine was pretty
Yeah,
elaborate.
it is. But it was cool because then we're talking about how the challenge of all of a sudden you let some of your walls down and now I've got all my weird animals hanging out in your perfectly ordered castle and stuff. And you're like, no, leave it alone. And I'm like, yeah, that's how it's supposed to be or something.
And you don't want to be trapped by the walls. Yes.
No, that the walls are a thing. We have to be careful about having too many of those.
Yeah, and I mean your story surprised me because it was so simple. You know, you were like, yeah, there are these two people on the path and then he like goes off and does his thing, but they come back together because of course they do. It's a fairy tale. It ends happily ever after. And at that point, like I wasn't thinking that Ryan viewed as happily ever after. I was like, wait, what? You feel that way? Okay, cool.
Yeah, but it was really interesting to kind of open it up that way, and somehow, yeah, it kind of brought us to a little bit of an equilibrium of just, all right, that's how you're seeing it. Cool. I can feel more settled just knowing that, and I can play with your fairy tale version of things, and it was fun.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was awesome. That was Ryan comes up with all the good ideas.
that's right.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about the messy thing and the being heard thing and how like
Mhm.
you're viewing that because that's another big thing that we're going to go into in the next podcast.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, one of the ways and that this has felt really different with our dynamic and that's felt so just awesome and so within how much we are working through things and talking and different levels of communication, it's been discovering that, hey, look, I think both of us, but I know for myself, I have to show up messy, and that's felt really uncomfortable. It's sort of allowing myself to not know what to say, allowing myself to have conversations with you, and where I'm emotional, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm crying, it like whatever it is, and just sort of needing to be there and let it be seen. And again, like the word is messy. It's that I cannot be put together on everything and have the answer for everything, but I still need to show up and keep like talking and we work it through. And the most amazing part has been the well, I guess validation is a word, but just how good it feels of when I can show up, I can be messy. I don't have all the answers. I am kind of a mess, like physically or whatever. I don't look great. I'm just not a put together moment. And you hear me, you don't freak out. You just sort of hear it and you say, yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah. And then maybe you talk about it. And then I feel better after we talk for a bit. And then all of a sudden it's this feeling of, wait a minute, wait a minute. You're telling me that I can just be my full self. I don't have to hold back. I don't have to censor. I don't have to sort of overly think about how I'm coming off, and it's going to be okay, and I'll be accepted for that. And that has been like, I've never been able to do that before in a relationship. And it's been pretty magical, pretty unbelievable to say, whoa. And I think, as we kind of mentioned before, like that, I don't know if I can come back from that. Like that's, now that I've tasted it, it's sort of, nope, that's what it kind of has to be. Yeah, I'm hooked.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's it, right? Like that is the magic, is being able to show up like that and be accepted and seen and doing it over and over and over again. Yep. Yep. It's been great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to mention about like how this has been different without going too deep is that message that you left me. It's been a few months about my needs. Okay.
Mhm.
And this is like one example, and it's my favorite example. So I'm gonna share it. A few months ago, I was having like kind of a meltdown. Like I was having a lot of emotions come up, and I was feeling flustered and like confused. And I left Ryan this like crying voice note. And he responds back to me and he's like, Nadia, I think you have needs that you need met that you don't know you need met. And like it's perfectly reasonable to have them met here. And it was around just like being able to vent at the end of the day or something. Like I was having stressful days and he was like, you can talk to me about it. Like it's okay to need me to be there for you, basically. And so he sent me this message telling me that I was allowed to have needs so that he could figure out how to meet them. And if I didn't know what I needed, to just tell him how I was feeling and he would figure it out. And I saved this voice message because it was so good. And I couldn't respond for several days. Like my nervous system had a response. I didn't know how to take it in. I didn't know how to metabolize it. And it was just like, it felt like shock to my body to have someone say, let me meet your needs. And that's still happening with certain things that Ryan does and shows up for. It feels like shock because the trauma in me, no matter how much work I've done around this kind of thing, it's almost automatic. And that's been hard, and we'll talk about that too. But it's also been really wonderful. So
Yeah.
I love that message. Okay, so is there anything else you feel like we need to touch on before we wrap this episode? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I think just kind of a summary thought comes to me of something along the lines of, yeah, I don't think I ever really knew what this sort of relationship could be like. And I think that there was a lot of stories and things of what I thought it should be, that I grew up with, that are all actually mildly toxic to extremely toxic. And I think we're very much still learning, and we're undergoing it ourselves. But yeah, really starting to strongly feel that there is a different way for partners and relationship to happen in the world, and it's better, like maybe even better than I could possibly imagine. So
I agree with that. Yes, better than you could possibly imagine. Yes. So that being said, we will be back in a week to talk more deeply about what is working and how it looks and what it feels like and where things are headed. And we're also going to be hosting a free masterclass on March 27th. That's a Friday evening. You can find a link to that I don't know, on the website, my meetup group. I'll try to put one in the podcast description as well. That masterclass is going to be a lot of fun, talking about how to call in this type of partnership and then what to do with it once it gets here. So yeah, we're going to stop this for tonight, and we will see you guys next week. Thank you.
thank you.